Welcome to Module 3, the discussion video on accounting for budgetary accounts. So let us continue our discussion on government accounting by analyzing the budgetary account. So let us read the overview first. It is the state policy that all resources of the government shall be managed, expended, or utilized in accordance with law and regulation and safeguarded against loss or wastage through illegal or improper disposition with a view to ensuring economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the operations of the government. The responsibility to take care that such policy is faithfully adhered to rests directly with the chief or head of the government agency concerned. So, yung resources rest directly with the chief of the head of agency concerned. So at the end of the discussion, we will be able to familiarize on the appropriation, allotment, and obligation process na more or less ay natutunan mo na on module number 2. You identify the terms, the forms, and terminologies used exclusively in government budgeting process. Identify the account titles used in recording of transactions in government accounting, and we familiarize on the use of general and special revenue funds in the government. So let's proceed now with the general accounting plan. So ito yung budgetary account system na involved in the government accounting. Kung paano ba yung proseso ng government budgeting, and how it is done. Kaya the topic is accounting for budgetary accounts. So first, we record the appropriation. So yung appropriation nga, ito yung release document, yung GAA na diniscuss natin before. The second, the preparation of the agency budget matrix. So naka-indicate dyan kung paano i-implement yung budget. 3, the monitoring and recording of allotments received by the agency from the DBM. So, once na naka-receive ka ng allotment, you monitor yung use, yung utilization ng mga allotments, and then yung recording nun sa separate registries. Next, yung release of sub-allotment release order. So, meron kasing mga government agencies na merong mga regional offices. So, nagre-release sila ng sub-allotment. So, yung na-receive nila na allotment from the DBM, then, magre-release naman ngayon sila ng sub-allotment release doon sa kanilang mga regional offices. Issuance of sub-allotment release order to operating units by regional offices. So, itong mga regional offices naman, kadalasan ay meron niyang operating units. So, magre-release din sila ng sub-allotment release order for their operating units. So, ganoon yung process niya. So, kung magkakaroon ng delay on the release of the allotment from the DBM, imagine how long it takes para makarating doon sa final operating units. So how do we record an appropriation? So what is an appropriation? As discussed before, ito yung authorization ng batas sa iyo to be able for you to incur obligations. So pwede ka nang mag-incur ng obligations once there is an appropriation. You are allowed to make payments by using the government funds. So kapag may appropriation, pwede ka nang mag-incur ng obligation at you are also allowed to make payments using the government's under specified conditions or purposes. Yung accounting for disbursements or yung laws and rules on government expenditures ay dyan na yun papasok. So itong appropriation, before we already have discussed yung GAA. Yung GAA is a part, a form of the appropriation, but there are several other. Kaya nga sabi dyan, which covers most of the expenditures of the government dahil naka-enlist dyan yung mga items na gagastusin for the upcoming year. Pero meron pang iba na panggagalingan ng appropriation. It can be from various public works acts because from time to time, pwedeng magkaroon ng mga construction ng bridges, ng roads. So, pwedeng magpasa ng various public works acts, mga appropriations para makagamit pa rin ng funds. Because hindi lahat na specify under the GAA. Next, yung mga supplemental appropriation laws that are passed time to time, this is also correct. Parang public works acts din yan. However, hindi, kumbaga ang logic niyan parang hindi siya napondohan on the General Appropriations Act, kaya nagkakaroon ng supplemental appropriation laws. Certain automatic appropriations intended for specific purposes. So merong mga automatic appropriations na kahit hindi ipasa ay automatically appropriated. For example, yung mga retirement and premiums ng mga pensioners. This is included in the certain automatic appropriations. Allotment, diniscuss na ito before, it is a document issued by the DBM which authorizes the agency to incur obligations. It can be entered into the ABM, yung Agency Budget Matrix, which covers the comprehensive release of specifically appropriated items, or through the Special Allotment Release Order. I'm sorry, medyo maingay. Okay. The DBM issues yung araw. Ito na nga yung allotment release order containing the authorization, conditions, and the amount of the allocation. This arrow may be the agency budget matrix or a special allotment release order, the release of which is subject to compliance with specific law. So once na si DBM release siya ng arrow, it contains the authorization and the conditions at kung magkano yung allocated for that particular agency. Yung arrow, pwede siya yung ABM, yung Agency Budget Matrix. So later on, we will have, let us look yung kung ano ang contain ng form ng Agency Budget Matrix. A special allotment release order, the release is subject to compliance. Okay. Okay, sabi dito, in the case of agencies with decentralized accounting procedures, sub-ARO or SARO is issued. Ito yung diniscuss natin kanina, yung mga operating units and regional offices. So notice of cash allocation, diniscuss na ito before, but let us emphasize, it is issued by the DBM to an agency to authorizing the latter to disburse by checks a certain amount within a specified period. This is a control device designed to ensure that all withdrawals are within the cash allocation. So ibig sabihin, yung NCA is a control kasi para monitored ng Bureau of Treasury kung magkanong pondo lang ang nire-release at a particular period of time. Ibig sabihin kasi ng notice of cash allocation, for example, ang budget mo for the GAA is 10 million, hindi naman isang NCA lang yung 10 million na yon. It is staggered nire-release ng DBM yung notice of cash allocation. Yung note, for example, for this particular month, 2 million lang muna. So, para ma-ensure na yung withdrawals ay within the, kumbaga, kasi kung i-release sa'yo yung 10 million, hindi mo pa naman lahat yun mauubos because that is the budget for the entire year. So, inuunti-unti yung pag-release ng cash o ng budget na naaprubahan sa'yo. Under the GAM, the Government Accounting Manual, the agency does not journalize the appropriations and allotments. Hindi na po dino-journalize itong mga appropriations and allotments, but they are recorded in the registries. Ayan, sabi niya, the agency records the allotment received in the Registry of Allotments and Obligations by means of a memo entry. So, hindi journalized, but memo entry. Ano ang nire-recognize as a journal entry? Yung receipt ng notice of cash allocation. Upon receipt, the accountant of the agency should journalize it by the following entry. You debit cash, modified disbursement system, regular, debit, credit subsidy from national government. Bakit may regular dito? If you will look at the government chart of the revised chart of accounts, meron kasing special. So, it depends. Kaya yung regular na notice of cash allocation ay papasok lang yan sa regular cash MDS account. Itong subsidy from national government, before it is called subsidy income from national government. But the introduction of the GAM, inalis na yung word na income. So, itong subsidy from national government is an income account. So, kung ikaw ay naka-receive ng subsidy from, kumbaga parang, di ba, when we say subsidy, parang ayuda from the national government. So, ikaw ay government agency, naka-receive ka ng pera from national government, it is treated as your income. since subsidy from NG is an income account. The preparation of the agency budget matrix is based on the GAA. Okay. So let's proceed now. Self-comprehensible naman itong preparation of the agency budget matrix. So let's go with the recording of the allotments. Upon receipt of the approved ABM and ARO, the budget officer records the allotment in the respective registries for allotment class through the obligation request. So later on, we will have a look on what an obligation request form is. So there are separate registries depending on the 4 allotment classes na program, project, activity. Ito, so word na PPA, normally ay lagi yang nagagamit in government accounting. It depends on the program, project, or activity to with. For example, yung diniscuss natin na 4 major classification of expenditures. So kung ang na-receive mong allotment is related to a disbursement or a fund for buildings, for property, plant, and equipment, it is recorded in the Registry of Allotments and Obligations Capital Outlay, yung RAWCO. If MOE naman, RAWMO, Registry of Allotments and Obligations for maintenance and other operating expenses, for allotments and obligations for personal services, and for financial expenses. So dito nire-record yung memo entry na tinutukoy kanina dahil hindi na yan gino-journalize yung pagkaka-receive ng allotment. Okay, one note, sub-allotment release orders issued to regional or to operating units are recorded in the logbook, okay? The registries for the allotment class covering sub-allotment for regional offices or operating units shall be entered in the RAOS, itong Registry of Allotments and Obligations, as negative entry in the allotment column and shall be deducted from the allotment balance. Okay, ibig sabihin kasi, di ba, kung naka-receive ka ng allotment from DBM, tapos yun eventually ay i-release mo sa yung operating units or regional offices, so babawasan mo yung allotments mo na yun. So it will be reflected as a negative entry in the allotment column. So later on, we will have a look at what a RAW, co-RAW, mo-RAW, OPS, and RAW-FE looks. Para ma-visualize mo yung mga columns. So let us define itong allotment release order. Let us differentiate, compare, and contrast itong allotment release order, special allotment release order, and the SARO, yung sub-allotment release order. Allotment release order, galing yan sa DBM to an agency containing the authorization, condition, and amount of an agency allocation. So from DBM, it is a formal document issued by the DBM sa agency, diretso. A special allotment release order is a document released by the DBM to an agency if it is subject to compliance or specific law or regulation or requires a need of clearance. So, ibig sabihin, this is an allotment order, allotment release order, but it notes a compliance. Kumbaga, merong regulation or it is subject to a compliance. Ibig sabihin, yung allotment na yon is for a specific purpose. Kaya siya special allotment release order. Yung sub-allotment release order, diniscuss na natin to kanina. Ito yung ini-issue naman ng agency to its regional units containing the authorization. Kumbaga, allotment galing kay DBM, binigay kay agency. Tapos ikaw, agency, meron kang regional offices or meron kang operating units, magbibigay ka naman ng sub-allotment release order. Okay, let's proceed with accounting for obligations. Accounting for obligation shall be taken up in the registers through the OBR, yung obligation request na tinutukoy kanina. The budget officer or head of the budget unit designated shall certify to the availability of allotment and is duly obligated by signing the appropriate box in the OBR. So later on, we will have a look at the OBR. Okay. So obligation. Okay. Alam naman na natin what an obligation is. Ito yung commitment by the head of the agency to bind the government for the immediate or eventual payment of a sum of money as discussed before. So, ang sinasabi lang naman dito sa recording and accounting for obligations ay, dapat kapag naka-receive ka ng disbursement voucher, halimbawa ito, the budget unit receives the DV or payroll and supporting documents. So, ibig sabihin, merong disbursement voucher requesting for an obligation. Ibig sabihin, merong request na bayaran itong certain amount na ito or merong contract or merong purchase order na itatransact. So, ang sinicertify lang ng obligation is that there is a budget for that particular expenditure. Yan ay kasama doon sa GAA na napondohan. So, yun ang logic ng recording of obligation. Ayan, the budget unit shall also verify the availability of the allotment based on the registry of allotments. So, kapag merong disbursement voucher, payroll, titingnan niya yan dun sa registry of allotments niya kung talaga bang merong pondo for that particular expenditure. Kung merong capital outlay, merong MOE, merong FE, or merong personal services. So, kung makita niyang meron, the amount obligated is recorded in the obligations column of the RAOS. So, merong obligations column. Then, i-forward na yun sa accounting unit for processing. So, yun yung process niya. May marireceive kang disbursement voucher requesting for an obligation or commitment of the head of the agency. Then, mag-a-attach dyan ng obligation request, which will be signed by the budget officer and the head of the agency. Then, i-forward na yan sa accounting for processing. So, ibig sabihin, that is the first step. Kumbaga, kung wala yang pondo or hindi yan kasama doon sa originally binadgetan, ay hindi yan magpo-proceed into payment. Okay. Note, there is no need to prepare a new OBR for corrections or adjustments made by the accounting unit after the processing but before payment was made. However, a new one is to be prepared for the following adjustment: refund of cash advance, overpayment of expenses, disallowance or charges which become final and executory. Ito kasing obligation request, it can be corrected and or adjusted as long as it is not yet paid. Ayun yung sinasabi lang dyan. Pwede siyang i-correct as long as it is not paid. However dapat bago yung i-prepare mong obligation request when it relates to a refund of a cash advance, overpayment, and disallowance. Okay. So, I will be ending this discussion video because on the next topic, we will be illustrating the use of the revised chart of accounts, yung mismong pag-journalize ng actual transaction, yung practical applications of the concepts you have learned in Module 2 and part of Module 3. Okay, thank you. Yun muna ngayon. Doon tayo sa part 2 on, doon natin i-discuss itong how to apply yung concepts, yung practical applications and journal transactions.